Welcome to the Deep Bass Podcast, where we take a hard look at the element that makes or breaks games, the music. I'm Peter Thomas, and I'm joined by my co-host, Cody Haltom, as we are happy to have you along with us on our journey through Stardew Valley. What's going on, Cody?
Hey, man, it's good to see you again.
I know. These 2 weeks, sometimes they feel like they're long. I'm always really anxious for the next episode, so they drag.
Yeah, they can. It feels like we haven't done this one in a minute. In our defense, though, we were both obsessed with a particular musical that came out in the meantime, so I blame that completely.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Hamilton. Let's just call it what it is, man. Everywhere I go, I have that soundtrack on anymore, and even when I'm just trying to fill in some dead space or dead air or something like that, or going around, I'm just like da 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 da. Yeah. All the time. Yeah, it's really good. I kind of wish that they would do that with more musicals. I was saying, I'd love to see the original cast of some of my favorites. I love the Book of Mormon. That musical is amazing. I would love to see the original cast do that.
Oh, yeah. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of these things, especially, in this COVID world that we're living in. I think it'd be a great thing to do. But I digress. We got some game stuff to talk about.
We do. I wish for just this moment, I wish this was a musical podcast so we could dissect Hamilton, but unfortunately not today. Before we actually jump into Stardew Valley, I do want to note we got a comment back from my good friend Karina. She is the Final Fantasy fan who is just an absolute diehard of the series. And she noted something that I needed to correct. So I didn't want to leave it as an error, but I also didn't want to re-record the entire episode just to fix one little thing. So I'm just going to note it here. She said that I wanted to note that Otherworld is not sung by Rammstein, that it is a very common misconception. It was actually arranged by Nobuo Uematsu and his band, the Black Mages, and sung by some lead vocalists of a Japanese punk band. I did some digging to try and see if I could get a proper name because I didn't want to leave it at that, but I couldn't find it. So I don't know who sung it. I apologize to whoever did sing it, but you did a hell of a job sounding exactly like that band because I think myself and many others were very confused and thought it was Rammstein.
Yeah, because I used to listen to that band back in the day. So whenever you said it, I was like, oh my God, it is. Because they sound almost identical. But the Black Mages, that's not a bad metal band name. I'll give them that.
No, if you've never listened to the Black Mages, they're really good to listen to all the time. It's if you want good heavy metal. It reminds me of, did you ever play Final Fantasy Mystic Quest?
Briefly. I own it. I think I own 2 copies of it, but I didn't get into it or anything.
No, that's okay. If you ever get a chance to, even listen to the soundtrack to that, it reminds me of kind of what the Black Mages did. So it's different than most Final Fantasies where it plays a lot of, the heavy guitars and the big drum lines and things like that. It's very different than what you would expect. A lot of people don't like the game. I happen to be one of the people who adore it. But if you slap Final Fantasy on anything, I'll probably drool over it anyways.
Yeah, they know how to get your money really easily.
Yeah, and I also want to do a brief apology because I don't speak German, and I realize I keep saying Rammstein, and it's probably Rammstein. So anybody who's listening who happens to be German, please forgive any of my bad phonetic spellings of these because I'm horrible with this stuff.
I always called it Rammstein, but that was just me and my friends. I'm not comfortable enough to correct you on the pronunciation of it.
I wouldn't know any better anyways. I'd be like, oh, yeah, it's probably it. But anyways, thank you, Karina. I appreciate you letting us know that. And without further ado, let's jump into Stardew Valley. So Stardew Valley was released on Windows on February 26, 2016, and since then has seen ports to pretty much every system you can imagine. It's on Mac OS, Linux, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, PlayStation Vita, iOS, and Android. And I'm sad to say, and I'll cover this a little bit more, but I own a copy of it on several of those systems. It is an open-ended farming sim, taking large inspiration from the Harvest Moon series. I believe actually Eric Baroni, who is also known as ConcernedApe, he spoke about the reason he created it was because he wanted to fix the things that he didn't like in Harvest Moon. So some of the gripes he had and stuff, he was like, well, I could either complain about it or I can just build my own. And he chose the latter and did a heck of a job. He actually was the one who developed the entire game from the ground up all by himself. So while you normally see big teams of people on this, he did everything. He did the development, he did the art, he did the music, anything that you see in that game, it's all him. So kudos to him for having the patience over 4 years to see this thing come together. The only exception to all of the work that he did was the publishing aspect. That was actually done by Chucklefish, but that has since changed. I believe he took that back and is now doing it all on his own. The game has since sold 10 million copies across all platforms by 2020. I don't know that I've heard of an indie title ever reaching a mark like that. That's phenomenal.
I don't think one has, personally. I was just thinking about that, and I was thinking, well, you know, like one of my favorite indies is one that you refuse to play, which is Cuphead.
You know what? Go ahead. I'll let you finish it.
No, just had to get that little jab in there while I could. But even Cuphead, that's so like a limited release. You know, I think it only came out on like 3 systems. So there's no way it could even reach that number at all. Do you have any information on why the relationship with Chucklefish fell apart?
I don't. I want to say that a lot of that stuff was kept pretty quiet. I think that whatever had happened, I don't know if it's bad blood or if they left on good terms or anything like that. So I don't want to be the one stirring like the rumor mill here. No. But I do know that it all occurred after a multiplayer was established. So I believe that Chucklefish and Eric Baroni got together and found a resource that would help him implement the multiplayer feature into it. And then after that, it was the ties were cut. But that's all I really know about it. So if anybody else knows, feel free to tweet us because we'd love to know, just out of morbid curiosity, if nothing else.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's completely all it was. I wasn't trying to dig deep on something like this. I was just like, I'm curious what happened there.
Yeah, me too. It's a pretty phenomenal game. So for being an indie title, it's really done quite well for itself. I can't imagine that if he really wanted to, he would ever have to work again just because of the revenue that you'd see from something like that. So kudos to him for doing a good job. I will say, though, our focus on this is obviously the music. Stardew Valley, for me personally, it is not the music that draws me in. It is good, but I just don't see it being top tier. Do you feel the same, Cody?
I'm kind of glad to hear you say that because I'll be honest with you, this was a drag to get through. I'm not saying that there aren't great tracks on this list, especially your side of things. Now that I'm looking at it, mine are just some more honorable mentions I wanted to kind of throw on there. I love this game. This is a phenomenal game. And it's a game that I played, but I never beat it. I own 2 copies, but it's one of those games that you can kind of make it your own. It's kind of similar to like Animal Crossing. Like, for example, I've been to your island in Animal Crossing. This is not the Animal Crossing episode, but follow me here. Like, your island is clean, neat. I think you got a spa on that thing. Like, that's your play style of a game like this. Me, I'm lucky if all my fruit trees are grouped in the right spot. So it's like it's a completely different play style, and there's nothing wrong with either way that you play or I play a game like this. It's what enjoyment do you kind of get out of it. And so because of that, like, I don't really have any memories with this game. I only played 48 hours of it, which is not long. I checked my oldest save file, and I got to year 2 winter. So I don't even know what the end of the game is or anything like that. So, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. I love the game itself, but the soundtrack, it's not the easiest to listen to outside of the game.
Yeah. Now, let me know here, and I guess everybody else, what is your familiarity with farming sims in general? Tell me a little bit about your background before you actually reached Stardew Valley.
Okay, so my very first one was Harvest Moon 64. And that was one of those games that my buddy was playing. I'm like, this looks weird. And so naturally, I rented it and tried it. And there's just something really cathartic about it. I don't know what it is. It's just a mundane, day-to-day grind of the whole thing that I like. Typically, for me personally, I try to get one game like this each console generation, because again, I'm the console guy, you're more of a PC guy. But I try to have like one game like this on tap in case I have the itch to play it. Same thing with like a racing game. You know, it's not necessarily my cup of tea, but I want to at least have one. So if I want to, I can go to it. I then got one of the Harvest Moon games that was on GameCube back in the day. And that's really my experience with it. And then this came out and I was like, well, this is something I need to have.
Sure. I have a pretty similar background. So I started my farming sim love around the Harvest Moon 64 era. I was reading a Nintendo Power magazine, and I believe I saw a game called like Body Harvest was the game I was reading about. And it looked interesting, and it was not even closely related to what Harvest Moon was. So I was out at GameStop or EB Games, whatever it was at that time. And my dad was like, you know, go ahead, you can go trade in these games that you brought in to trade in, and you can pick whatever you can afford with those games. And I saw Harvest Moon there, and my young brain was like, oh, that was that game I read about in the magazine. And I was very surprised to see that that was not the game I read in that magazine. So I took it home and I played Harvest Moon 64 for 10 hours straight. Now, I was still in grade school, still very much under like my parents' jurisdiction. So as far as their home rules were concerned, playing a video game for 10 hours straight was not something that they would have ever approved of. Needless to say, after that stint, I went upstairs, you know, looking for some food or something like that. And my mom was furious. And I was like, I don't regret it. I didn't say that to her face, but no, I really didn't. It was so easy to get lost in that game. And you're right. It's cathartic. It's like you're doing work that you would see somebody doing, you know, in real life, but somehow find a lot of enjoyment on doing, you know, those mundane tasks of just, you know, watering your crops, harvesting your crops, tending to animals, things like that. So it was an easy thing for me to fall in love with. I think I own every Harvest Moon game that's ever been out, except for maybe 2. Whenever Natsume and Marvelous split and they became Harvest Moon and Story of Seasons, I did not follow as much with Story of Seasons, and everybody yells at me for that. They say that those ones are better because it's still the original developers. But, you know, I have my thoughts on that.
I didn't know that happened.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I didn't know that it was, I always thought it was Natsume that did it and nobody else. So thank you for learning me on something.
No, yeah. So there was, you know, just not to get too much into it, but I think there was a little bit of disagreement with how contracts were going or something like that. But whatever the reason may be, Natsume decided we're going to go ahead and cut ties. We're going to keep the Harvest Moon name because that's our brand, but the formula and everything like that, we're not going to take from you or anything. So yeah, Marvelous started making all of theirs under Story of Seasons. And if you go to any kind of community forums or anything like that, you'll see a lot of people who are like, that's the purest form of it, right? They'll say that that's the original Harvest Moon that you know and love. And you'll find the people who are really diehard about that. And there's a lot of people who actually hate the new Harvest Moon games. I'm of the opinion that the more farming sims you give me, the better my life is. So I don't care who's making them. I'm enjoying them one way or another.
My opinion, having just learned of this, was, guys, you're fighting over a farming simulator.
It makes zero sense. You can have preferences all you want, but yeah. Anyways, I digress this time. So it was easy for me to pick up Stardew Valley. I'm a Super Nintendo guy. That's my era of gaming. I absolutely love it. So I saw a farming sim with 16-bit-ish sprites and graphics, and I'm like, count me in. I'm in. And I now own 5 copies of this game. I own 2 on Steam because my wife and I co-op together. So we use her account, my account. I've got 1 copy on Android because I had an Android phone once. I didn't have an Android phone anymore and went to Apple and bought a copy on that. So I have it on iOS, and I have a copy on Switch because when my wife was pregnant, she wanted something a little easier to take around with her and stuff like that. So I bought it on Switch. So 5 copies. I don't regret it. I'm happy to have contributed to the 10 million copies.
No, I mean, it makes sense. And it is a game, if you like this type of game. Once again, one man made this, nobody else. So he deserves all the credit that he gets, because this is a really, really deep game. Now, personally, for me, I only have it on Steam and on my Xbox One, but that's really all I needed, because this isn't a quote unquote Cody game. Like, I love it, but yeah, I love the game. Everyone, if you're interested in this type of game, you should definitely play it. So the most important question I have for you, though, who was Bae?
Bae for me was Penny. I am a sucker for the people who need help. I am just like, oh, you need my help? I'm there. I'm going to give that to you. I'm going to give you all my help. And I'm probably going to give you my love while I'm at it. We're going to be together forever and have babies. And that's going to be our life. No, I play a lot of games the way that I would be in real life. So, when I play Fable, I usually play the good route because I'm a generally good person. I like to think so anyways. So when I play a game like this, I see somebody who's in a pickle. And for those of you who've played the game, you know what I'm talking about with Penny, because she's in a trashy position. It is awful. Do you remember what it is by any chance, Cody?
No, because when I play this game, again, different styles of play, I know who my Bae is, which we'll get to eventually, but I talk to her. I talk to Robin, who upgrades your house, and those are the only two characters I know by name. That's it. Because the way I play, I'm more about the community center and the library than I am anything else. So because of that, apparently there are tons of deep story arcs and that kind of stuff with these characters that I know nothing about because I wasn't interested.
I've got more to say on that when we start getting into the music. So note that when we get to your number 3, because I've got thoughts. But
Lord, okay.
Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. Yeah, let's just say that you and I have very similar thoughts about how that all plays out. But yeah, I said, we'll get to that.
Tell me about Penny.
So basically, Penny's story is that her and her mom live in a trailer park. It's the only, or I shouldn't say a trailer park. It's the only trailer that's on the Stardew Valley land. And her mom is absolutely atrocious to her. Her mom's an alcoholic and is incredibly abusive in the way that she speaks about Penny. She talks to the player character like he's a piece of, or he or she is a piece of trash. Just is an awful human being in every sense of the word. I can't say that I've built up my relationship with the mom. I believe her name is Pam. I don't think it changes, but I don't know because I can't say that I maxed her out. I didn't like her. I was like, I would give her weeds every day if I could because I just could not stand that woman. She is an awful human being. So I wanted to pull Penny out of that situation. I'm like, you won't have to live with your mom anymore. You won't have to deal with that toxic behavior anymore. You can come live on my nice farm that's got all kinds of fruits and animals and stuff like that. And by the way, if you want to grab the eggs, that would be helpful.
Give her a home, put her to work.
Yeah. But, my best memory of this game doesn't actually deal with that Bae. It actually deals with my IRL Bae. So what I think is a cute story. And anybody out there who is listening to this, I don't take any kind of copyright on this idea. So feel free to take it, use it for yourself, because I thought it was pretty charming. But my wife and I, when we were doing a co-op together, I had told her that I was going to take care of all of the farming that was being done inside the greenhouse. So she never went into the greenhouse ever. Mm-hmm. And so while I was in there, I took the blueberries and the cranberries that we had, and I made it so that all the blueberries kind of made a background. And then the red cranberries, I did like a pixelated heart. So if you can think of the outline of a heart in red cranberries, and then everything's filled in with blue cranberries. So you can see it pretty distinctly. So then had that all set up. Once everything grew in, you saw all the colors nice and neat. I told her that I needed help with harvesting them, and I needed her to come in, and I kind of stood by the side of the door. And the minute she walked in, I had a wedding ring there, and I was jamming the A button as fast as I could so that she couldn't get in and see much of anything. But the minute she walked in, she saw the heart, and then the game instantly asked her if she wanted to marry. My character's name was Big Pete at the time. to make things even better. So I proposed to my wife again in this game. She thought it was very adorable. If you go to her Instagram, she has a picture of it up there and everything like that. So it was a lot of fun. But if you're looking for a cute idea to propose to a girl who enjoys Stardew Valley, or a guy, then you should try that one. That one seemed to work really nicely. Kind of unfair because I already married her, but you know what I mean.
It's the kindness of your heart. God, I know the Big Pete reference, and that got me harder than it was supposed to.
Yes, good old Big Pete. But anyways, I've talked too much about my bae. Tell me about your bae.
I never married her. Her name's Abigail.
She's not your bae. What the hell?
I couldn't. I tried. Okay, God.
What did you... Okay, let's hear that. I need to know how you couldn't marry Abigail.
I didn't try hard enough. Okay, that was the thing. I was too distracted, particularly by the mines once it got around to being winter, because I never wanted to leave that place. But again, I'm just more into the grind of things. So it's like if I would see Abigail in town, I'd be like, all right, well, I have some quartz over here. I know she likes quartz. Let me just give her some. And she's like, oh, thank you. And then just carried about her business. And I was just like, I do not get how relationships work in this game at all. Like, this is not what I'm used to from like Harvest Moon or anything like that. But yeah, when it comes to who Abigail is and that kind of stuff, we will be talking about once we get to our music list, because I actually have to click over onto the Wikipedia for Abigail in order to talk about one of my picks.
Sure. Well, I guess, without further ado, if you're good on your history, we can go ahead and jump into our top fives here. Go ahead and start us off. Tell me what your number 5 is.
Okay. Like I said, I didn't like the soundtrack. Nothing against some of these tracks. Peter has some real good ones. So I'm kind of pulling ones that I liked that aren't on his list, even though I do love his list a lot for the most part. This track really just kind of stood out for me out of all. Sorry, it's a Mines. Visitor to the Unknown is the name of it. It just really stood out of all the Mine tracks. Like, this is the one that kind of got me the most. I think it's the rhythm of the track that really draws it to me more than some of the other ones. On its own, it's not necessarily remarkable in any way. I spent a lot of time in the mines, particularly, like I said, in winter. So I know I've heard it, but I just don't remember it at all.
It's interesting because you and I definitely played these a little differently. Yes. And I could just tell by the way that we talk about it. My wife and I, and particularly my wife, she lives in the mines. So I heard the mines tracks probably more than any other music in this game, which I forgot to note this. But one of the interesting things about these tracks, and I don't know why they decided this, but ConcernedApe decided that they were not going to loop them. So you don't hear the tracks all the time. Sometimes you'll wake up in the morning, you'll hear a track for whatever season it is, and then it stops. And you just hear the footsteps and things like that, but you don't hear tracks. I think the only track that is dedicated and you always hear is the one that's inside of the main village area. Tracks inside of the mines and things, they all stop after a while and they don't loop, which was an interesting game decision. And I don't know if it was any good for it. I think maybe that's why I'm not attached to it. But Mines Visitor to the Unknown is what I put on my notes, and I'm not kidding, and it's in all capitals, was I almost picked this.
Really?
Yes, I did. And it's weird because I laugh sometimes at the way our minds jive together. Mm-hmm. It really spooks the shit out of me sometimes. I'm like, we really do have a very similar taste in music. Even though we don't always pick the same things, it's like I can see songs on your list where I'm like, yeah, I almost had that one. So it was close. But the reason I thought this was really funny that you picked it was because of how much it actually sounds like a Donkey Kong track.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, it's one of the few Mines tracks that exist that I'm like, okay, all of them sound original and they kind of fit the bill and everything like that. But this is the only one that truly sounds like a Donkey Kong track. So when I heard it and then saw you put it on the list, I'm like, oh yeah, makes perfect sense as to why he'd picked this. One of my favorite parts of this track is when that solid continuous bass starts hitting, that like do 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 do, that going through, and I'm just like all in at that point. I hear it and I'm like, yes, this track is good.
Yeah, like, again, if you're just joining us, welcome. But the way I do my notes is I listen to the entire soundtrack in one sitting. This is the first time I couldn't do it because at a certain point, because of the nature of the soundtrack, to me, the tracks just started running together. And so this is when I was, laid on my sofa listening to the soundtrack where I had to stop and go, wait, what is this track? So when I say it stood out, that's kind of what I mean, because all the other ones kind of just went by the wayside by comparison to something about this one really grabbing me. All right. What about your number 5?
I almost want to rescind on my number 5. So when I put this list together, I'm obviously familiar with the tracks and everything, but I do the same thing. Like I re-listen to the entire soundtrack because I want a full picture, right? When you're playing the game, you get tracks, here and there as you play different parts, but hearing it all together there's something a little different about that. So I re-listened to the track and I knew that I wanted to put a summer track on there, but I didn't know which one. They're all pretty good, but none of them really stand out all that much to me. I put this one on. I was re-listening to the soundtrack actually earlier today and was like, wow, I put on the most basic of all the tracks. But my number 5 was Summer, Nature's Crescendo. I don't know why. I don't know why. I think about it and I really put like a more of a critical eye to it. If you were to think about Stardew Valley and if you had to pick a song that kind of encompasses what you're doing, where you are and things like that, I feel like Nature's Crescendo definitely fits the bill. It sticks out as one of those songs that just, it kind of is like, if you had to describe the game in one track, kind of like what I was talking about for Funky Kong in our last episode, similar thing. So if I had to pick one track, this would be it because it's so basic. It is as nuts and bolts as they come for a track. If I had to redo, I put an honorable mention in for the second track. It's not mentioned, unfortunately, and it's a shame because I feel like it's probably the better of the summer tracks. But what were your thoughts?
It's a happy and upbeat track, very lively. This is not the quote-unquote summer track. And this is the other quote-unquote summer track to me. I do have one that I prefer better. Mm-hmm. It is on my list, so we will get to it eventually. I have a question, and this isn't like, because we're not necessarily taking pot shots or anything like that, but it's an honest question. What is that horn that plays during this track? Because I kid you not, it sounds like it's a kazoo.
I want to say it's a clarinet, maybe?
No.
Maybe?
I'm going to have to listen to this thing again.
Yeah, it's hard to say because I feel like a lot of the instruments throughout all the tracks are close to something, but they're not actually like, you can't pick one out and be like, oh yeah, that's clearly a horn.
Yeah, you might be right on the clarinet. Like now that I'm playing the song back in my head, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. He might have something here.
Yeah, that was as close as I could get to it. I think the only instrument that outside of the drums, the only instrument that I can ever clearly pull out of these is like an accordion. And it could be that too, I suppose, if I'm thinking correctly. I'm starting to draw a blank on what this track sounds like now.
Once again, professionals.
I know. Well, the problem was I sang your damn Mind song, and now all I keep thinking about is that song. The mines, they overtake my life, and now I just want to go find some gold.
But yeah, you noted it. A lot of percussion in this, but it's not as prevalent. Like in the start of the track, you think it's going to be really percussion driven, but it's not. It actually just kind of ends up tapering off. But yeah, that's really my thoughts on this track.
I forgot. I wanted to note one other thing. So a buddy of mine from the stream, and I believe you know Freshie.
Yeah.
So Freshie and I and a few others, we all played a multiplayer session of this, and we went back and forth about like which crops were profitable and stuff like that. And I'm actually going to drop this in our show notes. So if you want to look at it and criticize or praise his theory about this, by all means, go for it. But Freshie told me once that the best way to earn any money in this game is by blueberries in the summer and cranberries in the fall. He like wrote up like this thesis statement on it in docs and Google Docs.
What is this? Where is it?
It's at the end. It's at the end of my notes. You can grab it, but I will make sure it's in the show notes for you guys to listen. I mean, he was so serious about this. I mean, if I could dig back and find the stream, I will do that as well. But I don't know that I have that one saved, unfortunately. But yeah, he was like hardcore. He's like, berries are the only way to go. And he was just, I mean, would not let it go, to the point where my wife was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not fun. And even our buddy Muba, he was like, he just kept saying blue over and over again just because of how badly he wanted us to have this. So for those of you listening, if you want to check out the thesis and refute it, or like I said, praise it, you can find him on Twitter at thefreshie44. You can yell at him about it. But he put some solid points together. I mean, if you read that, that's like some educational level crap there he's got.
Hold on just a second. I actually want to pull it up.
Sure. Yeah, no.
8 hours later.
Oh, dear God, he did work on this.
Yes, he did.
Why?
I asked Freshie, man. He wanted to maximize profits so hard, so he put this whole thing together. I read over that document. I'm like, man, you took this way too seriously. For the 95% of the world who just wants to have fun, he's got money bags in his eyes.
Christ. Like, I'm always interested to know, and I always look up, all right, well, which is the best one, per season? Buy a lot of those. But I never got this into it. This is another level.
Also, I took a second while you were scanning the doc to bring back up my summer song. And you're right. It does sound more like a kazoo. I think I was confusing one of my other songs with this one. But yes, it sounds very much like a kazoo.
I'm not saying it is. I'm just like, because I'm wanting it not to be, honestly. So I'm like, please let it be a clarinet. But if it's a kazoo, I'll call it a damn kazoo.
If your guess is as good as mine. All right. So now that we've exhausted the crap out of my summer track, let's hear your four.
All right. So my number 4 is Dance of the Moonlight Jellies. This, to me, is, if you listen to last week's episode, this, to me, is this game's aquatic ambiance. It's just calming, peaceful. I love the waves, which is weird that it's actually in here, because I know we're going to talk about this at some point, but typically it's a separate file. But he just decided to put it all on one track, which I really appreciate, because it does help this track out a whole lot. Unlike an aquatic ambiance, nothing's trying to kill you, so it's not as good in terms of the tone that it's setting versus the environment that you're in this, where you're just on a beach. But it is a good and relaxing track just the same.
Yeah, I remember seeing this festival for the first time and being, well, I guess you can call it a festival, event, whatever, for the first time, and being very confused. I'm fairly certain that this event happens at the end of summer and marks the start of fall. And I remember seeing similar kinds of events in other games and stuff, where like you light the little lantern and you let it kind of fly up in the sky and stuff like that. But this event's a little different. You watch these people send off this boat with a candle in it, and then all of a sudden these like magic jellyfish start showing up out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, are they ghosts? Are they in the water? I can't really tell. I have so many questions, Cody. What is happening with these? What are we? Are they? Do you know? Are they alive? Are they spirits?
If it was up to me, I would still be back at the stupid farm. Okay, because what ended up happening to me, and it happens every time, because I did pick the game back up a little bit. It's like, oh, it's egg hunt day, and I would completely forget, right? And what ends up happening is I go around, I'm tilling my crops, watering my stuff, that kind of thing. And I'm like, man, do you know what? I need some more parsnip right over here. Let me go to the store. No, sir. You cannot go to the store. You have to attend this stupid egg hunt. So I don't remember the event until you just recalled it. So I don't know, like, the idea behind it. I assume it's summer jellyfish because bioluminescence is a thing, and that's a summertime thing. So that's like where my head goes with it. But honestly, I just wanted to get back to my farm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you for a lot of events, and this isn't just Stardew Valley, but the same with me. It's like when these events happen, it's like the reason I go is to boost my affection with, potential bae, but I do not really care about the stuff that's happening. I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't need to find eggs. Let me talk to Penny, and I will see you guys tomorrow.
Yeah, I was the same way with Abigail, and 9 times out of 10, she wanted nothing to do with me, so why go? I'll just stay home.
Right. But, as far as the track itself goes, I agree. It is another beautiful, peaceful, and almost sad track. And the reason I say it's sad is because it signifies kind of the end of summer. And in my head, it reminds me of almost like a coming of age, leaving the nest and starting on your own. Even though you have been playing the game for now 2 seasons, it just kind of, with the jellyfish and everything like that, that's kind of what it signified. So even though I didn't really understand the jellyfish piece, what I imagined was happening was like these jellyfish were ones that kind of grew to adulthood and were now kind of going off on their own, and you were seeing that kind of happen. But that was the closest rationalization I could get, because I have no clue if this event or this kind of thing happens where you can watch at night and see jellyfish. I've never heard of that in my life.
Oh, really? You didn't know?
No.
Oh, have you looked it up? Or are you like just now learning about it?
No, I'm just like, this whole piece of it. I never paid too much mind to it in the game. I saw it as an in-game event, and I was just like, okay, it is what it is, but never really thought deeply about it until we started talking about it, or getting ready to talk about it here. And I'm like, yeah, maybe Cody knows, because I certainly don't.
No, I actually do. With that context, like, I thought you were talking like what's going on in the game. I didn't know you were actually talking about the jellyfish. No, I can tell you what that is. Like I said, it's bioluminescence that is in, I believe, the tentacles of the jellyfish. I live down here with you, but I grew up like 30 minutes away from the beach in Maryland. So okay. It was common at night on the coast, typically right around sundown, if not a little bit after, when the waves crashed in between like the jellyfish and also some of like the plankton and that kind of stuff. They have it too. You can actually see like all the waves light up blue as they come crashing in. If you get a chance, you should YouTube it, because it's interesting looking stuff, but it would add context to what you're actually seeing during that festival.
That is wild. I did not know that was a thing, and I'm sad that I've gone 33 years and have never seen anything like that before in my life.
It's gorgeous.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, definitely look that up at some point tonight if you just want to be floored. But enough about my number 4. What is yours?
All right. My number 4 was a fall theme, and it is called The Smell of Mushroom. Just one mushroom.
Singular.
Yes, just a singular mushroom. And something that I really adore about this particular track, and you're going to come to find, both the listeners and you, is that I obviously have a lot of favoritism towards the fall tracks.
I noted.
They are very beautiful to me. And out of all the seasons, I feel like they're the most fitting. The winter ones are pretty close. Summer ones are pretty close. Spring ones are like meh. But the fall ones I feel like are spot on. But what I really adore about the music in general for Stardew Valley is that it includes these ambient sound effects within the music itself. So in a lot of games, there's kind of 3 tracks that are there. You've got music, you've got sound effects, and then you've got like the ambient tracks, which is like crickets or wind or something like that. But this is actually built right into the track itself. If you listen closely to this track, you can hear kind of like that fall crisp wind blowing in the background. That was something that really made this track shine for me. Not as much as my next track does, but it's pretty damn close.
Yeah, this is a really slow track. The low notes really make it feel extra earthy, really. The muted trombone adds a lot. I really like that. I agree with you. I do like the wind. If you would have told me this was a mine track, I would have believed you. Like, just like listening to it straight out, it sounds more like it would belong in a mine, something underground to me. But no, this is just what you hear when you're out tending your crops.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot I can speak on for this. This one was probably one of my most cut and dry tracks. You know, I put it on here. I'm like, yep, it's good. And it's kind of like a move right along track. Like I said, good, 7 out of 10. Let's be done with it, Yeah, let's hear what your number 3 is.
Okay, this is one that I feel is going to be interesting. Mine is
words.
Oh, no. Crap. All right, mine is Stillness in the Rain. This is Abigail's melody. And here's the reason why I put it on the track is that this is a character track. This is who she is. And she's basically the only character I know in this game. So keep that in mind. It's really short. It's only about a minute and like 7 seconds or something like that. But this track really is Abigail. At least the Abigail that she would let me learn of her. Anyway, so I want to read a synopsis of who the character is from the wiki here. It says, Abigail lives at the general store with her parents. She sometimes fights with her mom, who worries about Abigail's quote-unquote alternative lifestyle. Her mom had the following to say, I wish Abby would dress more appropriately and stop dyeing her hair blue. She has such a wonderful natural hair color, just like her grandmother did. Oh, and I wish she'd find some wholesome interest instead of this occult nonsense she's into. You might find Abigail alone in the graveyard or maybe out in the rainstorm looking for frogs. Really, to me, that is who this character is. And that's why it's even on my list. I mean, it's an interesting track. It's a haunting track. I just find it to be an excellent character track between Abigail playing her flute and the organ. That's why I rank this as highly as I did.
All right, so for this particular track, I'm going to read my it's not bad. It's just like it's hard for me to contribute a ton on the character specific tracks. And this kind of ties into what I was saying before, where I was like, let me remind you of something when I get to your number 3, is that I didn't really do much of the villager get to know one another thing either, which is odd because in all the Harvest Moon games and all the Story of Seasons games, like that is my focus. Like it's farming, my relationship with the villagers and, potential waifu, and then whatever else after that. But in Stardew Valley, I never felt the urge to. And I feel like part of that reason is because one of the things that Eric Baroni said that he wanted to do with the characters was make them more realistic and more relatable. I think because of that, I don't like them. There are so many of these characters that are there, and I'm just like, I have zero interest in you as a human. It's like at all. It was tough for me, but I'm going to read some of my notes pretty much word for word here. And I talk about not befriending people in Stardew Valley and couldn't relate to them on a personal level. I find that hysterical and ironic because of the aim that Eric had. And I said, the closest person I got to was Penny, but I don't know much about a lot of these people's backstories. And I was kind of hoping that, what you were reading from Wiki would answer this for me, but I don't really know how her track and her backstory jive together. Because when I listened to this track, what I heard was like a medieval, almost Celtic style music. That doesn't sound like that's her at all. I mean, I guess maybe a little because she hangs out in the graveyard, but it doesn't sound like the two really connect. Did you hear any of that whenever you listened to her track?
I didn't hear the Celtic. No, I can get the medieval because of the organ that comes in about halfway through. Like, I can get that, but Celtic, no. Like, to me, Abigail's
it's
just
very light.
Oh, is it? Okay. Then I probably wouldn't have noticed it.
Okay.
But to me, Abigail's just this weird kind of outsider. And this is a weird little outsider kind of track to me. Making potions, there is a wizard in this game for those who haven't played. Like, I would expect her to hang out with him more than anybody else. Like, that's just kind of the girl that she is and just her general interests. So I think this track is more toned to her interests, I think, than it is anything else. And that's just coming from the flute and the organ mainly. Yeah, that's just my thoughts on it because, like you, I don't know anybody else really. I know the little bit that I know about her whenever I would play the game and see her in passing, and she'd tell me, just bye. But that's really the extent of it. The little bit that I remember actually learning, because I did get a couple of hearts with her eventually, it seemed to fit this track really well. So whenever I heard it, I was like, oh, this is totally this character, based off the information that I remembered. It wasn't until I went back to put notes into this that I actually even looked at the wiki. And that's when I just did a clear copy and paste into a separate document for myself. That way I could just pull it up and have it there to read because I figured that would be easier than describing the character.
Yeah, there's a reason why none of the character tracks are on mine, and that's because of that relationships thing. But trying to relate somebody's track to a person that you don't really know, that's tough. But now that you've explained it, I definitely can see it a little bit more. Still don't make the connection myself, but I'll have to send or do one of my playthroughs where I befriend everybody and really get, maybe I'll like them a little bit more. But as it stands now, I'm just like, meh. I'll be in the mines, guys. See ya.
No, and there is a track where I feel like there's one on your track. Hold on, let me see if I can figure out what that note is. It just says, "I don't get it?" ? So, what is your number 3?
So my number 3 is another fall theme, and this one is called Goat Synth. And the reason I like this one more than The Smell of Mushroom is because I feel like this one fits even better as a fall theme. There's something in particular about the track that really just crushes it for me. And it's this interesting dreary style echo that plays when you're listening to it, and the reverberations that kind of are present throughout the entire track. I loved the synthesized music and how it pulls together the kind of like winter is coming theme, that feeling of impending winter on the way. Honestly, this track could have been a winter track itself. I almost hear like an ice level to it whenever I listen to it. I note actually at the bottom of these notes that I wanted to give a strong honorable mention to Visitor of the to the Unknown, which nearly took this spot for all of the same reasons. And I said the only reason it didn't get in is because I can't have two number ones. So that's me telling you that I was not bullshitting you. Your number 5 almost made it onto my list.
Okay, it's actually really funny that you say that, because for the first time, I've done this to you. I almost put Visitor to the Unknown on the list as well. This is not the track you're talking about, but it's weird that we had that connection on one of your honorable mentions here. When it comes to Ghost Synth, it's easy to see where the track gets its name. The synth is very ethereal and honestly unexpected. I know it shouldn't be. I remember this track vaguely, or I remember this track really well, but I vaguely remembered the synth that's in it, which to me, that's even the crazy part, like going back and listening to it again. Because I remember playing the game. I remember hearing this song. I don't remember the synth being in it.
Yeah, it's really remarkable whenever you go and listen to these, because like I said, and I think I mentioned this way back in episode 1, but it's like you can listen to these tracks and maybe not get all the elements or details, or some of them play so quickly that you don't really get a chance to truly listen to them until we do something like this, where you're just sitting down, focused on the track, and you're just picking apart every single element of it. And I feel like Ghost Synth is one of those ones where you can miss out on a lot if you're just playing. You're thinking about like the cows that you have to tend to and the crops you have to make sure are taken care of and things like that, and not actually focused on it. And again, coming back to the fact that this track isn't going to keep playing. So once it's done, it just goes dead quiet. It may play another song later, but you're not going to hear this one on loop. It just doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, it's so weird that it just cuts off. I was assumed in my own head, I don't know why, it was like a later in the day thing. I guess I just never really paid attention to it. Because, like at night, it's quiet and it's just like the frogs and what have you.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Right, and that's what I just assumed it was. I didn't realize or pay attention that the track just randomly ends at some point.
No, in fact, you note at some point where you're like, the track seems to, I don't remember which song it is, but you're like, the track seems to just stop. And I'm like, no, it doesn't just seem to stop. That's actually what happens. It's just done. There's no looping. I don't know why that bothers me so much, but it bothers me.
Well, I'm saying like in the game, I never noticed it. During the soundtrack, like just listening to the soundtrack by itself, that's where I was like, it just stopped.
Yeah.
Because, oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. That's what I'm. It's like, it's not a thing where it's like poorly designed or something like it. Just stops because in the game they don't loop it. They cut it out and then you're done.
I'll be completely honest with you. I thought YouTube messed up, but I didn't care to investigate. So.
No, it is not YouTube, except for depending on which playlist you listen to. If you listen to the same one I did, there is definitely one track on there that cuts off way too early. And it doesn't actually finish the track, but
okay, that's when I was like, no, but I digress.
Yes. So let's hear your number 2.
Number 2 for me is Summer Tropicalia. Is that how we're saying the end of that?
Yeah, Tropicala, something like that.
Yeah, okay, running with it. From the second this track starts, it has your attention. When I think of the summer season in this game, this is the track that comes to mind for me, particularly the beginning. This is a track that's energetic in a way that just makes you want to dance to it. Like I could play this for my nephew and he would be dancing within 2 seconds. I guarantee it. This track just takes you straight, or takes me personally, straight to the beach whenever I hear it.
I've got a funny story about this. When I was writing up my notes for this, I was doing it on my phone, and I had this window open with, our spreadsheet of our list, and mine was hidden. So all I saw was yours, and I'm going through and everything like that. And I'm laughing at my notes that I took for this because I'm basically being a humongous hypocrite. So I'm going to read this word for word for you, okay?
Oh, God. Okay.
I said, I kind of hate you for picking this because I feel like everyone loves summer tracks. They're fun, upbeat, and sprightly, as to be expected. It may be a basic bitch song. Can I say that? and then I go back and I left the notes there because I wanted to be honest. I don't want to take back anything I've said or anything. And I went back and looked at my list and I was like, God damn it, I put a summer track on my list. So don't worry, Cody. We're both basic bitches to go.
Okay.
But I said, real talk, yeah, you can't go wrong with the summer track. Why I personally didn't like this one, simply for the fact that it sounds more islandy than it does farmy, I guess. It felt like a track like this would fit more with Animal Crossing New Horizon, where you're on an island and you have this kind of fun, like, it does sound tropical. I mean, it's why it's in the title. But I said specifically, I think you picked the best 3 summer songs, though I will give a small shout out to the second sun song, which this was what I was looking for earlier. The sun can bend an orange sky. I feel like in order, if I were to pick which songs were the best, I would say that Tropicala was the most spot on for it. But I feel like the sun can bend an orange sky, even though it's not on either of our lists, probably has the most summer vibes without sounding tropical. And for me, it fit the bill a little bit more. I know we're not really discussing that, but it was just kind of like a side note.
Oh, no. Apparently, we don't know anything that we're doing anymore, which is on track. So we're golden, buddy.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Going off on a different direction, though, tell me about your number 2.
Number 2 was a good one. And while it didn't compete with my number 1, like the first game and the second game that we did in our first 2 episodes, those are hard to pick. In this particular case, I give this one a very solid number 2, but it, to me, is a very good track and you don't get enough of it, much like a lot of the music. But my number 2 song is Spirit Eve's Festival. And you only get to hear the song during this Spirit's Eve event, which is, I believe, the end of fall. And there's a lot of reasons why I love this track outside of the music in and of itself, which is, again, it's got the deep bass stuff that I love in it. It's got these heavy, undertones and has kind of this spooky vibe that you want to hear. And I even noted that it almost sounded like there's like this Middle Eastern touch to it. I joked and said that I was genetically predisposed to like this song. So people listening to the podcast have no idea why that is, but you do, and my friends and family know. So it was the music in and of itself is fine, but what I love about it is the event is by far one of my favorite events in the game. They redo the village completely. There's a maze with all kinds of spooky crap in it. People are lost everywhere and they're telling you about their feelings about it and stuff like that. And the whole time this track is just adding to that overall eerie vibe. I don't want to say it's eerie enough to make the game feel scary, but it definitely tries to aim in that direction.
No, this is going to be interesting to read through. This track it starts off really interesting, and I really dug the organ. You put kind of like the Middle Eastern thing to it. I said that I got a lot of Arabian Night vibes from it in mine. I said, like hardcore. The organ and the punji add so much character to this track. It's really kind of makes it. And you're right. This is like basically, for those who haven't played, this is basically the quote unquote Halloween festival. That's what this is. The ending to me of this one, going back to something you were saying earlier, with the chimes that are at the end of this, that reminds me more of a Donkey Kong Country track than the other one we were talking about.
Maybe it's instilled in both of us, man. Maybe we secretly love all these songs and somehow relate them all back to Donkey Kong because Donkey Kong is love and Donkey Kong is life.
Probably. And I am like replaying the game before we started doing this. So,
well, we are at the best part of the show, at least in my opinion, and we have arrived at our number ones. I'm going to give you the honor of taking the first go at it. So let's hear your number one.
Okay, my number one is Sam's band, Electronic. And when, again, laying down, taking my notes, that kind of thing, my first note on this, this perked me the hell up because it's so jarring as to where it takes place on the soundtrack. It comes out of nowhere. This is good. It's just so short and apparently area specific. I don't think I even heard this when I played the game. So I don't know when this takes place. When I was listening to all three of these, because I have like Sam's band, Heavy, which I thought about putting on the list just to be on brand, but did not. Pop, Bluegrass. I thought it was going to be the same song, just different instruments, I guess. I don't know why, because none of the other soundtrack is like that. But I was pleasantly surprised that it's not the case. Of every track that we have on the soundtrack, this would honestly probably be the only one I've listened to outside of the game for my own pleasure.
You made a really good point, actually, about the fact that there were, at least in the soundtrack that I listened to, there were 4 different styles. So there was the heavy you mentioned, there's electronic, and then I believe the other 2 were bluegrass and pop. I think were the other. Yeah, so I think that's all 4. You're right in that they sound completely different. And I actually applaud Eric for putting them together the way he did, because it is not just the same MIDI synthesizer that's putting all this stuff together. Like everything sounds distinctly different. Mm-hmm. And while I go back to the talks about what we said about Abigail's theme, and that, I have no clue where this is and where you would have heard this. Just nothing, as far as that goes. But out of the 4 that you picked, I said the same thing. I said I love the electronic one, and a very close second to me was actually the heavy. I said if you happen to listen to heavy, it almost had like a Metallica vibe to it in a way. But no, electronic was really great. It was pleasant, and like you said, it kind of perks you right up. It's not something that you're going to listen to relax by any stretch.
Not at all. It just comes out of blue, really, and especially if you listen to the soundtrack in order, it really does. I forget where it falls, but I just remember I was to the point where the songs were kind of blending together, and I was like, And then this thing came on, and I was like, all right, well, this is going on the list for sure. It was just a matter of where, and then number 1 it was. All right, so what is your number 1?
My number 1 is a Mine song, which shouldn't surprise anybody because I've done nothing but gushed over the Mines this entire episode. But the particular song is Icicles. as my wife would tell you, I am not shy about telling people about my love for the music in the mines. I am of the opinion that the music in the game doesn't play long enough, and I've mentioned that before. And I said this is especially true in the mines for tracks like this one. You'll hear this particular track when you are between floors 4 and 69. And I did want to note that the track that Cody mentioned in his number 5 is between 70 and 90, I think, if you're looking for that particular track. That's how much I play the mines. I know where these damn songs are. But it's considered the Icicle track is considered the area called Frozen Earth. So it's all the snowy areas that you see. Starts out as like a snowy cave and then goes to kind of like a snowy castle-ish thing. It's hard to describe, but it does fight for the attention with 2 other songs. You'll hear Cloth and Marimba of Frozen Bone when you're down there. But while they are both great by their own right, Icicles just hits a little differently for me. And it's funny because Cloth almost took it sounding like a cross between Starbound and Earthbound, which are 2 of my favorite games. And Marimba of Frozen Bone is whimsical and kind of fits the skeleton creatures that you see towards the end of these areas. But for me, Icicle just resonates a lot more with me. There's many reasons why I wanted to call this show Deep Bass. And one of those reasons was my absolute love for music in general that has deep bass notes in them. Notes that really drive a track through. When the bass on this song hits, it's both the bass drums and like a deep buzzing that's present. I just never want to leave. Like I will stop what I'm doing in the mines and will just listen to this track until it's done and then continue with what I was doing.
This is the one where I said, I don't get it, which is really weird because I actually was writing down some notes as you were talking. I put down, I don't get it. There has to be a story to this one. I said, sure, it's a relaxing track, but it doesn't particularly just in any way stand out to me. Like I find Dance of the Moonlight Jellies to be more relaxing. It just didn't hit me. But I think I understand why, because of listening to your explanation of our name, Deep Bass. Okay, yep. You like deeper, tones. Everything that you just said. I'm excited because I'm having a breakthrough on this as I'm talking out with you. Because I was thinking about the mines. If I didn't put Visitor to the Unknown on there as my number 5, I would have put Marimba. Now, the reason why that's interesting to me is, I brought up I was in band. Specifically, I was percussion. So a lot of my notes and stuff like that, I do note that, because that's just something I inherently pick up on more. And I think that's where we're getting the difference between, the personal preferences between the different Minds tracks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely does. And that's why I almost had Visitor, because you know how much bass is in that. I blame it on a lot of the hip hop and R&B that I grew up listening to, which had a lot of that in it. I think that's what made me kind of predisposed to enjoying tracks that have that, again, not just in video game music, but music in general. When I set the settings inside of my car, brand new car, I get in, first thing I do, turn the bass up. I want bass to be rumbling in my chest all the time. I really enjoy it. So I get why somebody would say like, this is a nice track, but definitely not number 1 favorite worthy. But, for me, it's wonderful. I really enjoy it a ton.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad track, but like we go to, our 3 number 1s that we've done in the past. There was always something where I could be like, yes. And this is just the only one where I was just like, there has to be more to this. Like I need to talk to you about this to kind of figure out why. Now that your reasoning like has been explained, I'm like, okay, makes sense, got it. Just different tastes. That's all.
Yeah. This is definitely one that doesn't have any kind of like deep background. There's no long anecdote that kind of goes with it or anything. It's more of like this is how I prefer to have my music. And if I could have everything sound like this, I'd be gravy. Give me all the bass. Yeah. Well, that was a heck of a list. I must say, I'm impressed by us. I don't like to toot, my horn all that much, but I'm glad that we were able to make something of this, because I think you and I both came into this episode like this is going to be a 30-minute. Why the hell did we do this? Maybe what is it? Posted this because we felt like we needed to. Might delete later.
Yeah, this went way longer than I expected because going in, I was like, I did not like this. This wasn't as enjoyable as some of the ones in the past, but lo and behold, this yielded probably our longest conversation about any of this. So pleasant surprises.
Yeah, I mean, Stardew Valley it's like we said from the start, it's a good game, and there's nothing. I would recommend Stardew Valley to everybody, gamers, non-gamers, you name it. I think everybody should play Stardew Valley, but I would never recommend them to buy the soundtrack. It's just okay. Like I said, I'd probably rate it somewhere in like a 6.57 range out of 10 or something like that, because it's all right, but it's not anything that I'm going to fall asleep like humming to like I would, some of our other games we've talked about.
I agree with you on that. There's just as good or as decent of a soundtrack as it is, there's not a lot that you take away from when you put the controller down. I think it's kind of the best way to sum it up and put it. Yeah,
I think more about the game itself. Like, what am I going to do next? What do I still need to fill out in the community center? Things like that. Mm-hmm. Then I do I can't wait to get to an area so I can hear that song again or something. But any final thoughts? Anything you want to wrap up with regarding Stardew Valley at all?
No, I think we definitely covered it in this time that we've been on this.
Yeah, I definitely think this was a pretty thorough run through a game, and I'm the same way. I don't have any extra thoughts. So Cody, as always, thank you so much for being a part of this with me. I really appreciate it, and you're always a pleasure to talk to. Thank you so much for all you do.
Anytime, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks to everybody who's been listening. You guys have been, like I said, killing it with all the support and love. Really appreciate it. One of the things I haven't done yet, and I wanted to do that here, and I'll try and be better with it moving forward through all the episodes so that you guys have that information no matter where you start. But we do have social media. We have our personal accounts, which you could probably find, just by looking at the main account. But Deep Base Podcast, as it stands, has a lot of social media. So we're on Instagram and we're on Twitter with those same tags. So just at Deep Base Podcast, and you'll find us wherever we may have things. I don't think that I will be doing any more than that, just because I manage it right now and it's a lot. So I try and post things here and there about the episode, little teasers and things like that. No need to follow if you don't want to, but we post about every episode that comes up. So it's just another way to keep track of it. If you're more of a Twitter person or more of an Instagram person, that stuff is there for you. So feel free to go give that a follow. But if you like the podcast itself, obviously the best way for you to keep up and to support us is to just subscribe or favorite it in wherever you're listening to it. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I will note that Google Podcast is usually like a day or two behind. No idea why. We post it up to anchor.fm, which is where it's natively hosted, and then it kind of gets sent out everywhere, and everybody picks it up fine except for Google. Google's like, meh, we'll give it a day, see what they think. But yeah, so social media is there. If you ever have questions, if you ever want to correct us about something that's going on that we had said and it was not right, feel free to tweet us or shoot us a message. We're always open to any kind of feedback at all, and we enjoy talking to you. Cody definitely enjoys talking to you. He is all over it. I go on and I have 18 notifications, and it's like Cody engaging with everybody. I'm like, damn, sorry, man, you are on. No apologies necessary, but you are on it, man. And so I appreciate that always.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, that's going to be it for us, guys. We will check you out. we will check you out.
Not this again.
We will talk to you guys next time on the next episode of the Deep Base Podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.